It is 6 o'clock, and people are milling about being social. It's the beautiful day. It's got everybody talking and walking, and it's great. It's a little cool, but still a beautiful day outside. So glad for those.
The sun is bright.
It is. So the vitamin D is getting there, even if the temperature isn't bringing it up. So glad that those of you can join us in person, those that are faithfully always joining us online, grateful for that as well. Anything we need to talk about before we get going too much into this? Questions, comments? Anybody reading my book?
Yeah, mention your book.
Yeah, the book is available on the Smith & Helwis site. I think it's still cheaper at helwis.com. Yeah. And put my name in, you should pop right up. But it is available on Amazon as well.
They have really good customer service at Helwis.
They do have very good customer service at Helwis. They do, yeah. And I'm grateful for them.
When you call them, a person answers.
They do. A person answers, and yeah, it's great.
Sounds like you have experience, Bob.
Yeah, I ordered a couple of books from them.
Oh, well, that was very nice. So yeah, it was. It's out there. I got to do a podcast on that aired this past Monday talking about it.
How'd that go?
I thought it went very well. It was Ministry Mondays with Meg, not our Meg, a different Meg. All the girls this age are named Meg these days. I don't know, but exactly, it's like Mary in the Old Testament. It's like 25% of millennials are named Meg. But no, it was with Meg Biddle. She works with the American Baptist Home Mission Society. And but she does this on the side, and invited me on. We had a great conversation. I think I stumped her a time or two. She was a little. I don't know what's the word, Meg. Gobsmacked is the only word I can come up with. She taken aback. Yeah, I think that I provided some interpretations of the Old Testament she had never seen before, and it provided wonderful insights, and she was very grateful for that. So it was a great conversation, about 45 minutes, and it was both visual and audio. So you can download it at your podcast opportunities, or you can go to Ministry Monday with Meg on YouTube and watch it and see how great my beard looked that day. I just got to say, on the video, really, I was very pleased with how it looked. I told Cindy, it doesn't look like that in the mirror in the morning to me, but on the video, it really looked nice. So I was pretty glad about that. Anyway.
So you're looking more like a professor.
A little more, yeah.
I haven't done this yet. I've neglected to do this. But just say, for everyone who looks at the book, a review on Amazon
Yes.
is really a good thing to do.
Bob Wallace is correct that for anyone who has the book, has purchased the book, whether on Amazon or not, they will verify purchases if you have, but even if you haven't, a review on Amazon does promote the traffic and get in the algorithm, so I'm grateful for that. And one bit of something to pray about, Christianity Today asked for a copy to review to consider review. So I don't know that they're reviewing it, but they at least asked for a copy to provide a review, which would be a really good get. That would be good press for it. I actually, for review copies, I don't have to pay for those. The publisher sends those directly to the people wanting to review it. So I called with that great customer service and asked them if they would send a copy, which they did. So they may review it. We'll see. They may not. But hey, just being nominated makes me a winner. That's what I'm going to say. Anyway, so any other legitimate reasons to kill time is what I used to ask my students. We got all sorts of illegitimate reasons to kill time, but are there any good reasons? No? Okay. Well, we're going to move forward in the Gospel of Matthew, and from here on, we've been going, especially in the Sermon on the Mount. I wanted to go verse by verse, and there were some really interesting things to talk about in the verses in the chapter, two chapters right after that. I want to sort of move a little bit quicker. Obviously, we're going to already 8 weeks in the Gospel of Matthew, but I wanted to move a little bit faster and highlight some of the things that are unique to Matthew. That are distinctives over and against Mark, Luke, and John. It's tough because Matthew is 90% of the Gospel of Mark is in Matthew. So it's a lot of it is Mark, and a lot of it's duplicated in Luke. So there are a couple of unique things we'll look at tonight as well, and so we'll move a little bit faster. We won't get quite as far as I thought I would hope to have gotten, but it'll be really, really good. So before we get going, questions, thoughts, comments? Okay. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were troubled and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The size of the harvest is bigger than you can imagine, but there are few workers. Therefore, plead with the Lord of the harvest to send out workers for the harvest." So we have this moment where Jesus likens the people to sheep, and we need shepherds. We need people to go and teach and provide. And so we get the naming of the disciples in this, and then he talks about sending them out. And this is what's really significant. In the sending out of the 12, Jesus sent these 12 out and commanded them, "Don't go among the Gentiles or into a Samaritan city. Go instead to the lost sheep, the people of Israel." Let me stop right there real quick. This is a statement that has been, well, it really, some people have interpreted this to think Matthew is a racist. That's basically all I know to say. That here we have these other wonderful gospels where, Jesus is meeting the Samaritan at the well in John, and Luke in Acts has this beautiful, reunion picture of the Samaritans and the Jews. And here Matthew comes along and says, whatever you do, don't go to the Samaritans. Just go to the Jews. I don't think that's what's happening here. I like to make that perfectly clear. But I do think that what Matthew is trying to do is make it clear that the Jews are not forgotten, that Israel is not omitted in this story. Especially when Matthew is being written, there is growing Gentile population within the church. And if Matthew's written when we think it is, probably in the mid-70s, at that point, it may be 50-50. It may very well be that there's more Gentiles in the church than there are Jews at this point. And so in an effort to remind that Israel has not been forsaken by God, that Israel is remembered, the Jews are part of this story, that he wanted to make sure and include this point as well. Because remember I said Matthew is very much a Jewish Christian gospel. It is written with that in mind. And so I think that he's trying to highlight that in this. And now we've already seen he has concerns for the rest of the world. We had at least three Zoroastrians at the very beginning of this story, right, that came and brought gifts to the child Christ. So we've seen him have concern for the world before. And so that's why this is such an unusual sentence. But I think it is a sentence as a reminder that they're not forsaken. Yeah.
He's not saying never.
Right. At this point in the story, right. And there are a lot of different things about this point in the story. And among them, what happens as they go. And so let me continue on. As you go, make this announcement. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those with skin diseases, throw out demons. You received without having to pay. In other words, I've given you this without you having to buy it. Therefore, give without demanding payment. Workers deserve to be fed, so don't gather gold or silver or copper coins for your money belts to take on your trips. Don't take a backpack for the road or your 2 shirts or sandals or a walking stick. Whatever village you go into, find somebody in it who is worthy and stay until you go on your way. So Matthew is saying that don't expect the rules of hospitality to be in place for you. Expect them to take care of you, right? That this was before the days of Motel 6. You would go into a town and someone would feel the obligation. Hospitality was always paid forward. And you knew someday you'd be traveling. And so when someone comes into your town, you take them in, you wash their feet, you feed your animals, you provide food for them, you do all these things. And so Jesus is telling them right now, you can expect to be welcomed. Right now, you can expect for people to receive you and fulfill those obligations of hospitality. And so that's one of the reasons I think it's still in that circle of don't go to the Jews or go the Gentiles or the Samaritans, go only to the lost sheep of Israel. But there would be that expectation that they would still be taking care of you in Israel. They would still have that belief. When you go into a house, say peace. If the house is worthy, give it your blessing of peace. But if the house isn't worthy, take back your blessing. So that'll show them. Taking back your blessing. But what's interesting is as we go forward, if anyone refuses to welcome you or listen to your words, shake the dust off your feet as you leave that house or city. That would be when people would come in a pilgrimage to Israel. When they got to Israel, when they entered the land of Israel, they would shake the dust of the Gentile lands off their feet, and then they would go into the land. And so what Jesus is saying here is you treat that house like a Gentile house. You treat that house as though they aren't don't worry, they aren't part of they don't get it. And so treat them as outsiders because they have not welcomed you or received you here, okay? And then we get, I assure you that it will be more bearable for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah on Judgment Day than it will be for you in that city. So another point, if you haven't believed me about the issue of Sodom and Gomorrah being one of hospitality, even though Ezekiel says it in Ezekiel chapter 16. You can believe it here because it's in the context of hospitality that Sodom and Gomorrah are being talked about here. The sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was a lack of hospitality. It was a failure to welcome the stranger. And that's repeated in Ezekiel, obviously. It's subtle it's not subtle if you were reading it for the first time. It's subtle to us in the book of Genesis. It's explicit in Exodus, and then putting it in the hospitality conversation here, I think, shows that point again. So it's a hospitality issue that we're talking about. But that's the shaking the dust off your feet. Treat them like Gentiles. They're outsiders. Ron?
I hadn't noticed before, but it refers to our city, and then the city is the second repeat.
Yeah, that's right.
And I always thought of that scripture as individual.
Individual homes, yeah. We're about to have Jesus curse a couple cities for their lack of welcome. So that's probably the context there, yeah. So yeah, obviously you're not going to be as ostracized as you might think here. Now we're going to be persecuted later. In fact, very quickly, not very long from now, that you're going to be persecuted. In fact, we're going to see, I think I have it here. Yeah, look, I'm sending you as sheep among wolves. Be wise as snakes and innocent as doves. Watch out for people because they will hand you over to councils and they will beat you in the synagogues. They will haul you in front of governors and even kings because of me so that you may give your testimony to them and to the Gentiles. So this message is one that is going to put you at risk. So be prepared for that. You know, there's a cost here.
You can see the look on.
I can see you thinking.
Jesus is sending them out now?
Yes.
So where are they going to be
The kingdom-
in a while when he...
Well, he'll be back. They'll be back. They're going out. They'll be right back.
He's not sending them on
This
long
is a short-term mission trip that we're going on right now. Right. This is because they come back not long celebrating of the great successes they had. Yeah.
I never thought about that.
Yeah.
I
Preach.
always thought if they were with Jesus the whole time and only after
Teach the kingdom.
resurrection and they got
Yeah.
they
Teach the
figured out
kingdom,
how
raise
to
the dead,
bypass it,
heal disease. Yeah. Go and do it.
So they were a group, but they they went off
Mhm.
and they came back together.
They did.
During Jesus'
Correct.
ministry. Okay.
Yeah. He sent, I think it's Luke that tells us of the sending of the 72, where it doesn't just send the 12, he sends out 72 in partners.
All right.
So, yeah.
So this is maybe the beginning of him sending them out?
Yeah, this is the first one, because he just names the disciples here.
Okay, well now this makes more sense.
Yeah.
He wants to help with their success and confidence.
Right.
So start with the Jews.
Right.
If they don't want to listen to you, just move on.
There you go.
Right?
So you're reading this as a leadership approach here.
He's helping them have early success so
Yeah.
they can gain confidence.
Okay.
So when it gets tougher
Well,
later, they have
relative
early success.
relative success. Let's not, yes. At least welcome, if not success. They at least can expect people will feed them and provide them shelter, and they don't have to bring any extra money or extra sandals or anything because they'll have people. They will expect and take care of them, which is good. Later on in the story, we find out the next time when Jesus is getting ready to go at the very end, make sure you sell your cloak, sell and pick up another cloak. Pick up this, buy these. He wants you. You're not going to be welcome anymore.
Okay, but I want to point out one more thing.
Please.
Based on what I'm now realizing, this
Okay.
is like an early sending.
Yes.
Almost from the beginning, he's
Yep.
saying, heal the sick.
Right.
He's
What's he say?
empowering them to do some
He
amazing
says, heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those with skin diseases, and throw out demons.
things. Okay, so
Yeah.
the disciples were told from the very beginning.
They are empowered
in using the power
of the Spirit of God.
They can do these things.
Yep.
What happened to that? No, I mean, to us today as followers of Jesus,
Having
we
that-
don't have that power anymore,
that confidence?
or we just don't even try.
I would, well,
I'm being serious.
I know you are, and I'm going to answer you seriously. Although I always think of the joke first, but I'm going to answer you seriously. But we're going to see very shortly that even Jesus, the only power that Jesus has is the degree that people believe it can happen. He will only work miracles to the degree people believe it can happen. And I think there are cultures in which that level of belief exists even today in ways that it doesn't exist in Western countries. And it might very well be that that's the case.
I've never met anyone that said they can raise the dead.
I
I've
haven't
met
either.
faith healers.
I have met faith healers as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have too. Yeah. And I think I believe in faith healing more than I believe in faith healers. I will say that. But that's that's the cynical side of me this evening. So I will confess. All right, let's move forward here. Don't think I have come to bring peace to the earth. I haven't come to bring peace, but a sword. Well, that just screws up the angel song at Luke all to pieces. I have come to turn man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. People's enemies are members of their own household. That is actually a quotation from Micah chapter 7. So this, as Matthew normally does, he pulls elements from the Old Testament that in context don't necessarily mean what they are used to mean in the New Testament. But we've seen that already in Behold, a virgin will conceive at the very beginning. That's not what Isaiah 7 is talking about, but that's the way a good rabbi would make an argument. And so he's pulling from Matthew 7 here to drop this in. And a little bit of what we'd already talked about last time, right? Those who love their father or mother more than me aren't worthy of me. Those who love son or daughter more than me aren't worthy of me. Those who don't pick up their crosses and follow me aren't worthy of me. Those who find their lives will lose them. Those who lose their lives because of me will find them. We have Jesus completely undermining family and power dynamics in the first century. So there was nothing more important than family, and nothing more important than doing what your father says, but it's going to set families against one another. And something that we saw happen, something we see happen in John chapter 9, right, where the man who's been born blind, they call his parents in and say, is this your son? And he said, well, we know he's our son and we know he was blind. Anything else you can ask him. They completely, just throw him to the wolves on that one, just throw him under the bus. But so we've seen this already happen, and the disciples calling, with the nets, walking away from their father, right, and following Jesus is completely turning all of this on its head.
Well,
So
I think completely undermines is a questionable statement.
completely undermines is a questionable statement?
That was your statement.
That was my statement.
Jesus completely undermines the concept of family.
No, the concept of family in the first century and the power dynamics in the first century. Yeah.
I'm still with this because, you say you got to read the Bible and the whole thing. You can't
Right.
just read one.
Agreed.
One verse.
Yes.
And I don't think that there is much evidence of Christ demeaning the family in any way, or saying, look, if you're going to be part of my kingdom, somehow the family doesn't matter
Would you
anymore. And that's what when the word completely undermined.
would you say
the word I'm taking.
would you say subvert? Could I say subvert and you'd be okay?
No,
You wouldn't say subvert either.
absolutely not.
Okay.
I think it seems that there's a suggestion here that yes, if you have to choose
Yeah.
between faith and family,
Right.
it may come to you're having to choose faith.
Right.
But I don't think he is setting up. Well, it's either faith or family. Pick your pick.
Well, it is in the first century in particular. The family, as we've talked about before, family dynamics thoroughly hierarchical, and the father's word is law. And so for sons to not choose that is a complete attack on first century concept of family. I mean, it absolutely is for anyone to choose Jesus instead of standing there with Zebedee mending the nets is not something that I think people would have understood. I think it would have been as radical as you're expressing in many ways.
Well, that happened to a few people.
Yes.
It happened to a few people, but it didn't. The churches that Paul was founding, 30 years later, they weren't family splitting ideas. I mean,
They were absolutely.
I don't think it's the basis for saying that.
Oh, 100%. Because when Paul would go to a town, his modus operandi was to get kicked out of the synagogue. He would go, he would preach in the synagogue, he would get kicked out of the synagogue. Some people listen, some people don't. And the ones that listen form the new church, and the ones that don't kick him out of town. And
There's a
so,
lot more in the Bible about respect for
Sure.
rather than abandoning family.
But at the same time, it is Jesus who says, when his family comes to visit, he says, who are my family but the people that do my will?
Sure, he said that on that one particular occasion, but it seemed to me he was kind of concerned about his mother at the cross.
He was in John, absolutely.
So
Yeah, but she was at the cross. She had followed.
It wasn't this universal thing about
Well,
if you follow me, or somehow your family is less than.
no, I think that the key is here, because what your point is well made, that when Mary is at the cross, he's providing for her. When Mary is trying to shut him up because the family thinks he's crazy, who are my mother and my kids? I mean, the Mark passage, they think he has a demon. And that's when, who's my family but those who do my will?
Apparently he didn't separate from his family.
He called them to believe. If they followed, then absolutely. Yeah. I think that it was more disruptive to family than what I'm hearing you say. I think it was far more, particularly in the first century, far more disruptive to family.
I question whether the scripture ever teaches us to be consciously disruptive of family.
If you are absolutely consciously to be called to be disruptive, if it calls you to compromise Christ, without question.
I will go there. I don't think there is any overwhelming evidence to suggest that following Christ is likely to cause family disruption.
You don't think it's likely to cause family disruption? Can you imagine in the first century a Jewish family having a son who becomes a Christian? That is
That was what Paul was dealing with all the time.
right, and that's family disruption, right? That's being put out of the synagogue.
I mean, we don't have a lot of Paul talking about that.
No, I mean, other than embodying it in Acts with, like I said, disrupting synagogue worship as he goes all across the Mediterranean.
I mean, the
But
last thing we want to do, I think, is tell a divided family. Hey, you're the believer, split from the unbeliever.
well, Paul says that.
Well,
I mean, Paul says that if they're able to live at peace.
we don't often preach that.
No,
I would suggest not preaching.
you're right. Agreed. But I have absolutely said that. I've said that to someone in a relationship where, as Paul says, they won't live at peace, right? Where the choice is Christ. I mean, we have a believer, unbeliever, and there's unwillingness to coexist. Then I think that Paul said, that's a divorce situation, and absolutely you go for it. And so I think it is. I think that what Jesus is trying to make clear is there is no obligation, any political, familial, whatever, that is more important than complete going to the cross for Christ, a willingness to commit completely, wholeheartedly. And there's nothing that can override that commitment.
I think, yes, I won't disagree with that.
Yeah.
I don't think, fortunately, thankfully, mercifully, God doesn't call most of us to that.
I think that, most of us typically find family and try to raise family in godly ways. Absolutely. But as I shared...
It's not just a few.
Right.
It's the 95%.
But I mean, I shared last week a story where my belief in my call put me at odds with my father.
Yes.
And I know a lot more stories like mine. So, yeah, I don't think it's an understatement to say he subverts the idea of family, because that's the accepted paradigm of the first century is no longer in operation. That's a complete subversion to me. Yeah, Bob, you were waving at me.
Verse 37 helps us put
Yes.
the three previous verses in perspective. That if it comes down to it,
Yeah,
if you put your family first and you're going against
Right.
what you know God
Right.
wants you to do, you've got to go with following, doing what God wants you to do, and your family has to come second.
Yeah. Well,
So hopefully you won't be in that situation where you have to decide
Yeah,
which
I mean,
one you have to follow.
we even in the Old Testament, we can talk about honor your father and mother, but that is one verse in which there are dozens others that order the father and mother to live honorably. That there was an expectation of parents to be following Torah and not exasperating children, raising them in appropriate ways, so that the honor your father and mother is making that assumption in Deuteronomy that the parents have lived honorably at that point. And when they aren't, then we have those exemptions. Yeah, Ron.
I'm not sure it helps the discussion, but I look back and almost all of these verses that we've just gone through are very binary choices. They're very black and white.
They are.
This or that.
Yeah.
And even what's in front of us on the screen right
Yeah.
now is that same way. Even those who don't pick up their crosses and follow me aren't worthy of me.
Right.
It's either or.
Yeah.
And so every one of these statements that
Yeah.
we've read up to this point has been very either or. You're either in the house
Yeah.
with us or you're out of the house because you don't want to see this.
Yeah, and I think that is probably because if we think about the context of this, if we think about this gospel being written to Jewish Christians, then it is almost a foregone conclusion that all of them have lost family as a result of this commitment. To be a Jewish Christian in the first century, to acknowledge Christ, is going to set you against the majority of Jews who did not recognize Christ as Messiah. And so that kind of binary that you're talking about could very well be meant as an encouragement. The emphasis by Matthew here as an encouragement that you guys have made the right choice. It's okay. I mean, you may have lost mother and father, you may have lost aunt and uncle, you may have lost your support system and your synagogue and all of this, but no one who's lost that you will find yourself in that. So I think that could be written in that way as well as a comfort, because one of the times in John, one of the things I'm proud about the Gospels all are written at least a generation after Jesus, no matter how early you think they're written. And yet, they so well represent that time of Jesus. You would normally expect something written that late to portray the later concerns, right? The Jew-Gentile problem, or something that reflects the last half of the first century as opposed to the first half of the first century. And the Gospels do such a great job representing the first half, which I think is a testament to the authenticity of the text in many ways, that it does that. But there are a couple times it bleeds through, and one of them in John is that John chapter 9 passage where I'm talking about, because the language used there, that they were going to put him out. And that was the phrase, that they would put these followers of Christ out of the synagogue. They would put them out. And I think that was a reality in 60, 70, 80, as opposed to 30, 40, when I think that these events are set as opposed to when the text is written down. And I think that was a reality of losing everything that you were socially, right? You don't have family. You don't have where you would get married and buried and all of those important things that give who you are definition. Losing that is going to be so shaking to who you are existentially. And that could be part of the nature of this text, is finding ways to comfort in the midst of that kind of ground-shaking change because you've committed yourself to Christ. So that's probably another thing to remember, that not necessarily that maybe this helps a little, Bob, that this may very well, how about that, need to be read descriptively instead of prescriptively. This is the reality that was facing these Jewish Christians in the first century, and they needed that encouragement that they haven't backed the wrong horse, right, and that they've lost their parents as a result of committing to Christ. What does that mean? And so it may very well be that could be where some of this comes from. Yeah. Any other cans of worms I can open? No? Okay. Now when John, this would be John the Baptist, heard in prison about the things Jesus was doing, he sent word by his disciples to Jesus asking, "Are you the one who's to come, or should we look for another?" Now, every single gospel has to deal with John the Baptist. Everyone mentions John the Baptist. John the Baptist was, second only to Jesus as far as fame and reputation in the ancient Near East, to the point that even today, there are groups, and I can't remember the name. I meant to look it up before I got in here. It starts with an M. I believe it's Maronite. But the churches in Western Iraq, there are, I'm going to call them churches in Western Iraq, for whom John the Baptist is the focus of worship. Even today, we're talking 2,000 years later, right? When Paul gets to Corinth, he meets Apollos, a follower of John the Baptist. In Greece, right? It's a long way for a follower of John the Baptist to be. So you cannot imagine the towering presence that John the Baptist was in the first century. And so all of them have to deal with that. And so Matthew has John baptize Jesus and talk about how great Jesus is, and that's all important. But then we actually get a moment of John's doubt here, which I think is significant. Right? I mean, here is this towering presence of, what is it?
The Mandaeans.
The Mandaeans, that's right. I'm sorry, not the Maronites. The Maronites are a different group. The Mandaeans.
Not easy to pronounce.
Yeah, it wasn't in my head either. So, but to have this towering person of John the Baptist have this moment of doubt is in some ways kind of an encouragement to people who have their questions, right? That remember, Jewish Christian audience committed themselves to Christ. This is the Messiah. We all say it is. And to have John go, is it really? Are you really the Messiah? Is a moment of encouragement, right? It kind of acknowledges the difficulty of belief for everyone. If John can have questions, then certainly we can all have our questions about this. And certainly these people who have committed themselves. Jesus...
Because this is after he baptized.
This is after the baptism, right. Jesus has been working, Jesus has been teaching, did the whole Sermon on the Mount thing, yeah.
And he's still asking,
Are you sure? Are we sure you're the Messiah, right? I mean, have I committed my life to the wrong point? I'm just curious. It's really the question here. Jesus responds, "Go report to John what you hear and see. Those who are blind are able to see. Those who are crippled are walking. People with skin diseases are cleansed. Those who were deaf, where am I now? Deaf now hear. Those who were dead are raised up. The poor have the good news proclaimed to them." So we have some quotations from a couple of different places. Happy are those who don't stumble and fall because of me. Isaiah chapter 61 primarily, that's where we get our word gospel there. And the first sermon of Jesus, you might remember in Luke 4, where he mentions the prisoners being set free and the poor have the good news proclaimed to them. And on top of all of that, more than you would already expect, we have the blind able to see, the deaf can hear, and the dead are raised up. So we've gone even beyond what you would expect for just the good news being proclaimed and prisoners being set free. So Jesus says, hang in there. I know it's hard. This is God's work. God is working. Here's where the Isaiah and other verses tell us this is the case. And then after those people leave, Jesus goes on to talk about how great John is. He spends a whole time, is there anybody like John? There hasn't been anybody like John. John was crazy. John was amazing. Hadn't been a prophet like John to today. I guess he was putting himself in the today part. But he does go on to show great respect for John. I'll come back here. Well, after he goes, let me ask the question, then I'll go to how he finishes that conversation. But he does, so there is this great respect and reverence paid to John the Baptist. So even his moment of doubt, right, that is normalized, and he's pushing him a little bit. And then he says, and by the way, John was great. So he doesn't want to, none of the Gospels downplay John at all. It's not like, well, John's not right, Jesus is right. None of the Gospels do that. It's like, John is amazing, Jesus is just a lot more amazing. So, yeah. Anything there before I get to the big finish? I love the finish.
Yeah, Rob, yes, there is. Is there anything extra biblical about John? I mean, historical writings about John?
Josephus mentions him, and I don't know a whole lot else, actually. I know we don't have a whole lot from that first century. Philo's not going to say anything, probably. And then, of course, Christians talk about him in relative to Jesus more than they talk about anything else. So apart from the Mandaeans, I believe, and Mandaeans, and Josephus' mention of him, I don't know much extra biblical about that. Yeah, it's a good question. But Jesus finishes up. Okay, Ron.
Yeah, quick. Are you going to go to 13 and 14 at all?
I don't think so.
Can I read it?
Please, read 13 and 14.
It's interesting. I don't know what it means exactly. If I'm raising it. For all the prophets, he just complimented John.
Yeah, talking about how great John is.
He
Right.
really a lot of detail on that. then for all the prophets and the law prophesies until John.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are willing to accept it, he is Elijah who is to come.
Right.
I don't know what that means.
He is Elijah who is to come. There is the Jewish tradition, because of the end of the book of Malachi, the last of the prophet, the book of prophets. The very last section promises Elijah's return, because Elijah, didn't die. Elijah was taken up into heaven in a tornado. The chariot of fire separated he and Elisha, and then the whirlwind, or the tornado, blew him up into heaven, which we always think of as a gentle rising wind, but it's a whirlwind. This is not a light wind that blew Elijah into heaven. This gave rise to the tradition that Elijah precedes the coming of the Messiah. And this was existent in the first century as well. And at Passover meals, you have a chair, you pour a drink for Elijah, the doors open for Elijah as a way of praying, "Come Messiah." That's in fact, I think SNL did a comedy bit about Elijah showing up to a Seder service once, being somewhat disruptive, as you might imagine, on SNL. But that's the belief, is that Elijah is the one who precedes the coming of the Messiah. So, exactly. Exactly. So John the Baptist is Elijah, embodying the spirit of Elijah, showing that I'm the Messiah. Yeah, so he has to, remember, Matthew, talking to Jewish Christians, wanting to re-emphasize all the ways Jesus is truly fulfilling the Old Testament, not abolishing it in any way. So all those things you're expecting, God is doing those things, just probably a little bit different than you thought. So the spirit of Elijah, his dress, his opposition of kings, all of that, very Elijah in that way. So yeah. So then he finishes up with, "To what will I compare this generation? Like a child sitting in the marketplace calling out to others, 'We played the flute for you and you didn't dance. We sang a funeral song and you didn't mourn.'" So he's telling the kids who are yelling at other people for not doing the things that they expect them to do, right? You're yelling out for other people to listen and upset that they're not doing what you say, that you don't have any authority to ask for in any way. And then he says, "For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. Yet the human one, Son of Man, came eating and drinking, and they say, 'Look, a glutton and a drunk and a friend of tax collectors and sinners.' But wisdom is proved to be right by her works." So it says, there's just no making any of y'all happy, right? John comes along and fasts, and you go, "Oh, he's crazy. Can you imagine a guy fasting like that?" So I come along and I don't fast. You go, "Oh, he's crazy. Look at him drinking like that." I'm starting to think you people just don't want to believe. That's really what it's starting to come down to. Other people aren't dancing when you play, and so you're upset. And John can't make you happy. I can't make you happy. Starting to think you just all can't be made happy. That's what I'm seeing. So, you know those folks? They just aren't happy unless they're miserable. You know them? So, yeah. I've known some. I'm not going to call any names. That wouldn't be polite. Any thoughts? No, you don't call any names either. Any questions? I don't want to give the wrong impression.
You were soliciting
No,
names for-
I'm not soliciting names for those that are not happy unless they're miserable. Though I do know some. So, okay, we'll keep going. Then he began to scold the cities. This is the place where he had done his greatest miracles. Then he began to scold the cities where he had done his greatest miracles because they didn't change their hearts and their lives. So he'd done things, but they didn't listen. "How terrible will it be for you, Chorazin? How terrible will it be for you, Bethsaida? For if the miracles done among you had been done in Tyre or Sidon, they would have changed their hearts and lives and put on funeral clothes and ashes a long time ago." Two Gentile cities, okay? So these are Jewish cities seeing these miracles and not believing. The Gentile cities, they would have repented, but you guys didn't. Now, I'm gonna take a moment, which I shouldn't do, but I'm going to take a moment and defend Chorazin and Bethsaida. And I'm only going to do it in this way, because the buildings in Chorazin and Bethsaida in the first century were all built out of black basalt stone. And the day that I was in Chorazin was a day that we were experiencing a Hamsim. A Hamsim is the Arabic word for 50. And it is when the wind comes from the east off the desert as opposed to the west off the sea. And if it's called a 50 because it feels like 50 days before it get any relief from that. That's why it takes so long. And that black basalt stone soaks up that heat. And it radiates as you walk through. In my life, I felt like I've never been so hot in my life. I was like walking through an oven. It was like walking through, the hottest day of summer and having someone put a blow dryer in your face. It was just so miserable. I cursed Chorazin and Bethsaida, I will confess. But if I had lived there, I would have been very grumpy. That's all I'm suggesting. So maybe they didn't welcome Jesus because it was just so dang hot, right? Who can welcome anybody when it's just so miserably hot? But they don't. They don't show hospitality, right? They don't welcome. They don't recognize. But Jesus says, better off on the judgment day than you. And you, Capernaum, will you be honored by being raised up to heaven? No, you'll be thrown down to the place of the dead. After all, if miracles that were done among you had been done in Sodom, it'd still be here today. But I say to you that it will be better for the land of Sodom on the judgment day than it will be for you. Another context of refusing to welcome Jesus, comparison to Sodom. So again, hospitality, which is really what the problem is that we get there. So I don't know what Capernaum's problem is because they don't have the black basalt stone. They got regular white limestone stuff all over the place. So I don't know why they were grumpy. I know why Chorazin and Bethsaida were grumpy. I don't know why Capernaum was grumpy. So. Okay, we'll move on. Now, in Matthew 12, the rejection of Jesus is starting to ramp up. They accused Jesus of having a demon back in Matthew 9. Jesus didn't say anything to them. They do it again here in Matthew 12. They're mad at him because they're just picking some heads of grain and eating them. They call that harvesting, and so they get in trouble on the Sabbath. They challenge him healing on the Sabbath, and it just continues to get more and more severe. And to the point that Jesus is starting to call them out. And he says, therefore I tell you that people will be forgiven for every sin and insult to God, but insulting the Holy Spirit won't be forgiven. And whoever speaks a word against the human one, the Son of Man, will be forgiven. But whoever speaks against the Holy Spirit won't be forgiven, not in this age or in the age that is coming. The unpardonable sin, blaspheming the Holy Spirit. This has given rise to all sorts of unfortunate interpretations and caused all sorts of anxiety for people, wondering around if they have blasphemed the Holy Spirit. Understand that this is biblical hyperbole, the unpardonable sin. The actions against God and the Son of Man are forgiven, but not the Holy Spirit. It's a statement about unrepentance, is what this is about. You are not recognizing the gift that the Spirit is doing, the power that is coming through, the miracles that are being worked, that Jesus is being used by the Spirit of God. You are not recognizing these things. You're denying what God is doing. It's willful unrepentance. I'm going to fall over a chair here. It's willful unrepentance that you are showing. That is what is being unpardonable here. It's not that I've accidentally said, God, when I smushed my thumb while I was using a hammer. That's not the unpardonable sin. This is denying that God is moving in front of you at this point. And so the accusations that Jesus is bringing against these religious leaders is ramping up as well as their criticism of him, to the point that he says, if I get there, come on now, there we go. An evil and unfaithful generation searches for sign. The verses right before this says, can you give us a sign that it's yours? He goes, well, an evil and unfaithful generation searches for a sign. In other words, y'all are evil and unfaithful. You guys are wanting signs. The only sign I'm going to give you is Jonah's sign. As Jonah was in the whale's belly for 3 days and 3 nights, so the human one will be heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. So the only sign he's going to give them is resurrection, which they're going to not believe also. Right? We know Matthew's the story that gives us the religious leaders were working hard to put guards at the tomb, to cover up the resurrection, to hush down all of the rumors of it. So even that sign we find out later on they've denied as well. So I mean Jesus is calling them evil in this story. 100%. Anything else there? Okay, let's look at a couple of the unique parables in Matthew. These are 2 parables only found in the Gospel of Matthew. 13:24, Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like someone who planted good seed in his field. While the people were sleeping, an enemy came and planted weeds among the wheat and went away. When the stalks sprouted and bore grain, then the weeds also appeared. The servants of the landowner came and said to the master, didn't you plant good seed in your field? Then how is it has weeds? An enemy has done this, he answered. The servant said to him, do you want us to go and gather them? But the landowner said, no, because if you gather the weeds, you'll pull up the wheat along with them. Let both grow side by side until the harvest. At harvest time, I'll say to the harvesters, first gather the weeds, and tie them together in bundles to be burned, and bring the wheat into my barn. One more parable that's the same spirit. Let me tell it real quick. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that people threw into the lake and gathered all kinds of fish. When it was full, they pulled it to the shore. When they sat down and put the good fish together in containers, but the bad fish they threw away. That's the way it'll be at the end of the present age. The angels will go out and separate evil people from righteous people and will throw the evil ones into the burning furnace. People there will be weeping and grinding their teeth. And I love this. Have you understood all these things? Jesus asked. They said to him, yes. Totally got it. Completely understand. So the kingdom of God, the church groups that we come on, we're going to have good wheat and we're going to have weeds among it. And it's not our responsibility to weed the church. As much as we'd like that job, that is not the job God has called. God is the one who separates the good wheat from the bad wheat, the good fish from the bad fish. These things are going to come alongside. We should be careful. We should be prudent. We should be discerning. But it is not our job to give people what they deserve. Figure out who deserves what in this process. So these are two unique parables in Matthew: the good wheat and the bad, and the weeds, and the good fish and the bad fish. So I just find that interesting. And the overzealous disciples totally get it. No problem.
Well, I find it interesting too, because again, this seems to be a bit contradictory with Paul.
Yeah.
And
And Hebrews.
yeah, I'm sorry,
And Hebrews.
Hebrews,
Yeah.
Well, I'm a Paul scholar.
Sure. Of course.
Missed it.
Right.
So, I mean, is there what's that transition?
Probably audience. And the difference between a theologian and a pastor, I think probably. But that statement, that recognition that it is going to be, you got good folks and bad folks out there, right?
I think you preached something about the bad folks not too long ago.
Did I?
Why do bad things happen?
Oh, I did say, why do bad things happen? That's true. Because people are rotten. That's my position. But yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily at odds with Paul. They're probably talking about two different things. I mean, obviously, Paul is not wanting rampant sin and unrepentant, like in Corinth is the one I think of in particular, right? That's one where he's making this person doesn't need to be in that position to do these things. But I think that is also dealing with a person in leadership. That's dealing with someone who's creating the factions in the church, because that's all in that whole section of the factions that is a problem in Corinth. And that is probably different than speaking to individuals about sort of in the global sense. As you go through this, there'll be good folks and bad folks, and it's not your job to give them what they deserve. That's, I think, a slightly different message there.
What are you all talking about?
Bob hears that when I say it's not your job to give people what they deserve and trying to weed the church, Bob hears that, and I think rightly so, in contrast to Paul's condemnation of particularly, I mentioned Corinth, some of the behavior at Corinth where these people shouldn't be in the positions they're in and shouldn't be doing these things. And so yeah. I mean, we obviously make some choices in our congregation. We do background checks before you're going to work with the kids. We're going to, we're not saying you can't come to church, but there are certain things that we're absolutely going to guard carefully to try and be good stewards and protect those that are part of our fellowship.
Right. We're welcoming, but we also have our limits.
We just try to discern as well. Yeah.
This is consistent with moving on. This is consistent with don't waste time with.
Yes, it is.
People who are not listening or obeying.
Yeah, that's true. Don't throw your pearls before swine. That's in the same section, yeah. When Jesus finished these parables, he departed. When he came to his hometown, he taught the people there in the synagogue. They were surprised. They said, where did he get this wisdom? Where did he get the power to work miracles? Isn't he the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother named Mary? Aren't James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas his brothers? And his sisters, aren't they here with us? Where did this man get all this? They were repulsed by him and fell into sin. But Jesus said to them, prophets are honored everywhere except in their own hometown and in their own households. I think it's interesting that this doesn't happen in Matthew until chapter 13. We are halfway through the book of Matthew before this happens. This is the first thing that Jesus' ministry brings in Luke. From the very beginning, he's rejected in Luke. But in Matthew, we don't tell this story until we're halfway there. I don't know what that says, but I think it's interesting. We've already had John the Baptist doubt. John the Baptist doesn't doubt until 3 chapters after the first sermon here. So the chronologies are different between the two Gospels, which is fine. I don't have any problems with that, but I think that makes me ask why. What are we narratively trying to do to show Jesus' rejection here? I think after this whole conversation about, faithful worship, rejecting family, and calling these religious leaders all the names that he can think of, he then gets to these people that should receive him, and they don't get it either.
He's also maybe saying to his disciples after he's told them they're going to get rejected, and by the way,
I've been rejected too. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
me a lot.
Yeah, everywhere I go, people kicking me out. I've been kicked out of some of the best towns in this. Yeah.
Rob, I'm going to call you out because I think you're misinterpreting the scripture.
What did I screw up?
Rejecting your family. I think that's what Jesus is saying. He's saying God first,
Right.
not rejecting your family.
I'm-
Choose God first.
Right. I was that was the subtext in my comment. Yes. That-
But I'm trying to help Bob.
I know you are. I know you are. Yeah.
Like, God's not telling us to, reject
No.
our families.
God is telling us to pick.
Rob's been tortured enough.
Okay.
We worked him over pretty good.
That's all right. That's all right. I'll take it. I've been to an academic meeting. I will take issue with verse 58. Now, I normally do not call out translators like this, but this is a bad job. Because 58 in the Common English Bible says he was unable to do many miracles there because of their disbelief. That is a very good translation of the Gospel of Mark telling this story. That is not a good translation of Matthew. And I went back and read the Greek just to make sure I was right on this, and I am. It does not say he was unable to do. It said he did not do. It literally says he did not do in the Gospel of Matthew. This is a big difference between Matthew and Mark. That's why I actually recognized it. In Mark, he was unable to do any great work there.
ESV translates it exactly as you just said.
Is it? RSV does as well, and NRSV does as well. I'm very surprised they do this. That is overstepping, in my mind, the meaning of the text.
So you disagree with
Completely. Yeah. I disagree with the way they rendered 58, yeah. Because in Mark, that's what it says. In Mark's telling, when he goes home and he gets kicked out in Mark 6, it says he was unable to do any great works there. He could heal a few people. That was about it. But it literally is commenting on a lack of power in Mark because of their unbelief. Jesus couldn't do any good work there. In Matthew, it softens that and says he didn't. He did not do many miracles there because of their disbelief. So it's not saying he wasn't able to, it just says he didn't. And Mark says he couldn't, that he was unable. Yeah, he was not able to do any great work because of their unbelief.
Any or many?
It said any great work, he could just heal a few sick people,
Okay.
which apparently is not impressive.
So his power was limited because
Of their unbelief, yeah.
But here it's just saying it should
In Matthew, it should say he didn't. He
do
doesn't.
many.
Correct. Yeah.
It still doesn't say.
Rob, why should those be different? Why should those verses be different?
Why does Mark say one way and Matthew say it another?
Yeah.
Okay, you weren't asking about translation. You're asking about why they said them differently. Mark has what we'll call the lowest Christology of all the Gospels, and all that means is Jesus is the most human in Mark. He is the highest Christology in John. Jesus is the most godlike in John. But in Mark, you see Jesus getting upset at the disciples. They're grumpy at each other. He doesn't know the day or hour. Only the Father in heaven knows that. He was unable to do any great work. I mean, so it really is emphasizing both the dependence on God and the failure of humanity. Mark in particular loves to drive home the failure of human beings. No human being gets the point. The disciples miss it. His family misses it. His hometown misses it. The only person to get it is the Roman centurion in chapter 15. That's the only person that understands who Jesus is. And so that is part, I think, in Mark of that global, people are just stupid, right? Everybody who missed Jesus is just stupid. Matthew is, I'll be honest, I think Matthew is uncomfortable with that. I think Matthew is as uncomfortable as some folks in church when I preached on it with saying that Jesus could not. They don't like that Jesus could not. They don't like Jesus' power dependent on human belief. Even though we see it other places, your faith has made you well, your faith has saved you, Jesus has said that the power rests in your faith and your belief. And so, but I think Matthew softened it because of frankly discomfort with saying what Jesus couldn't do. So he just didn't in Matthew. I think it was a
And so this is
interpretation.
translated incorrectly.
I do. I don't normally say wrong, but I think that's wrong. I would take points off of a student if they translated it that way, because they did not render the Greek faithfully. Yeah. So that's what I would say. So, but that's me, the Greek professor. I didn't teach Greek a whole lot. I taught it 4 or 5 times. So anyway, any questions or comments before we go? Good conversations tonight, so that's good. All right. Well, I would not be here next week on Spy Wednesday. Spy Wednesday is the name that many British churches give to the Wednesday before Easter Sunday. It is the Wednesday that, for some reason, they have worship services that commemorate Jesus' betrayal by Judas. And so no meeting on Spy Wednesday. A friend of mine said, I think I shared it on Facebook. She said, we call it Spy Wednesday. I know some churches that call it Empty Wednesday. I said, we call it no Bible study, but handbells and choir will meet Wednesday. That's what we call it. So, so we won't meet next Wednesday. We will then have our Monday, Thursday service in this room at, what time did we say Monday, Thursday? 6:30 for Monday, Thursday. 7:30 for the Good Friday service on Friday. And Easter Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. So very excited about that. Palm Sunday this week, though, before we rush there.
Are you sure it's 7:30 on?
Am I sure it's 7:30 on Friday?
Yes.
I'm almost positive it's
Well,
7:30 on
that's what
Friday.
we've already published.
Yeah.
That's official. The patch says it is.
6 o'clock to the choir room, it just seems, I thought it was just an hour. That's fine.
Maybe you guys need a lot of work. I don't know. I'd ask. Well, sure, obviously they do. Not you, of course. No, obviously that meant them. So, all right. Well, great. Well, I will see you all Sunday. Have a great week.